Now we have Brad Gutierrez from the American Red Cross. You may notice in your package there is an incredible resolution that was adopted by the Council of Delegates of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in 2013. It was actually a follow-up to a resolution that was adopted in 2011 on the role that Red Cross and Red Crescent societies can play to advance the abolition of nuclear weapons, focusing on humanitarian consequences and international humanitarian law, and it includes in there the value of cooperating with civil society organisations and with parliamentarians. So we're very happy to be able to develop that cooperation between PNND and the various Red Cross and Red Crescent societies around the world. So, Brad, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I won't try to repeat or reinforce necessarily what my colleague Francois has stated on the 2011 resolution, but rather I'll focus on the 2013 resolution, which was really designed to be a creation of and an adoption of a 4-year action plan of how to implement the ideas that came out of that 2011 resolution. To summarize the core goals of that action plan, it basically calls on the national societies and other elements of the movement, which Francois laid out for you, to advocate before governments the movement's concerns regarding the use of nuclear weapons, their humanitarian consequences, and the need for concrete actions to prohibit their use, ultimately leading to their elimination. Another element of the action plan is to call for the movement actors to educate the populations of their countries about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the limited capacities currently existing to respond to any humanitarian crisis that may result from their use. An important caveat in the action plan is the phrase "to the extent possible." And basically what we're trying to get at here, and I think the aim of the resolution in putting that caveat in, is that it acknowledges that in many national societies there's a broad spectrum of capacity and a broad spectrum of context within which national societies operate. That caveat is significant because it does acknowledge the broad diversity of political, operational, and capacity contexts in which the 189 national societies find themselves. For many national societies, the act of approaching their governments to advocate for a particular issue is not customary, and in fact, they may not even know where to begin the conversation. And for many of you who are parliamentarians, it may actually be the case where you reach out to them rather than them reaching out to you, because they're not experienced or customarily engaged in this sort of dialogue. For others, the political realities make it difficult to engage on topics of political sensitivities. And it's difficult in many countries, particularly the United States, to find a topic that is of more political sensitivity than nuclear weapons. In still other national societies, the operational tempo and dealing with disasters and other humanitarian challenges may simply not afford the bandwidth with which to make this a priority in their daily work. You can think of Syria, for example. Here in the United States, the American Red Cross is a strong auxiliary to the U.S. government in time of natural disaster and providing services to our armed forces, as mandated in our founding charter of 1905. We've taken a very pragmatic approach to the nuclear weapons issue in our conversations with the U.S. government. We've shared the 2011 and 2013 resolutions with them, discussed at length the position of the Red Cross movement, and they understand our concerns, and I would go so far as to say they actually agree with many of them on some level. But we have to recognize that they live and operate in a geopolitical reality of the world that we, as an independent and neutral organization, work very hard to avoid. The American Red Cross is also focused not only on the danger of nuclear weapons and the detonation of such influence, but also on the effects of a dirty bomb and the effects of nuclear technology disasters. It's our belief that these are as likely a scenario, in many cases probably more so the likelihood of having to deal with a nuclear disaster than a nuclear detonation. And in many ways, the humanitarian consequences and the issues that arise from those sorts of disasters would be every bit as problematic in the near term. We are spending considerable time working with Red Cross and Red Crescent partners in studying the best ways to respond to increase our response capacity and our nuclear disaster preparedness. For example, we're working closely with the Japanese Red Cross, studying the Fukushima power plant disaster and trying to learn from their experiences, as well as going back to our own experience in 1979 with the 3 Mile Island disaster, and trying to find ways in which those two disasters can inform and shape our thinking going forward in terms of disaster preparedness in the nuclear realm. American Red Cross is concerned about these issues, as are many national societies. I think, if I think about Norway, if I think about Austria, if I think about Australia, there are a number of national societies who are very engaged with their governments on this issue and who are advocating strongly for the issues that are laid out in the resolutions. And we will continue, as the American Red Cross and as will other national societies, continue to dialogue with our governments, with civil society partners, and with our populations in trying to educate and trying to make the case that the humanitarian consequences and the ultimate results of a nuclear scenario, regardless of the source, are ones that we presently are ill-prepared to respond to, and certainly need to look at that more closely and study it more carefully. In the interest of time, I'll stop there and take questions.
Thank you very much to our three speakers. I think the last one, Brad Gutierrez, was putting forward some of the considerations for PNND in our countries on engaging with Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. Very, very useful. We are close to the end of the time for this session, but we'll extend it another 10 minutes because I think there is possibility of some questions and discussion about some of the issues that were raised by the three speakers. So I am looking around and I see so far about 3 ones raised. I'll start off with Jackie. Jackie Cabasso.
Thank you very much, Jackie Cabasso. And for this question, I'm wearing my Mayors for Peace hat. I'm the North American coordinator of Mayors for Peace, and our Vice President, Mayor Plisquelic, has just arrived. He'll be speaking on the next panel. In the United States, as you so diplomatically put it, this issue is very politically sensitive, and yet the Red Cross has a reputation with the American people as a very solid, mainstream, all-American type of an organization, which is incredibly valuable to us in this struggle. So I'm wondering if, I have one particular activity in mind that I'm wondering if you think this would be something worth exploring. Mayors for Peace has a Hiroshima-Nagasaki poster exhibit, which it makes available to cities around the world, which is regularly updated, showing the photographs of the devastating consequences of the aftermath of Hiroshima-Nagasaki. And I've long thought it would be very powerful if we could organize local exhibits hosted by mayors and local Red Cross chapters. Do you think that in light of the resolutions and the recent developments, do you think that might be feasible? Would local societies be open to that? And do you have any suggestions of how we might best approach them?
I do think it's feasible. I think the challenge right now is basically trying to coordinate that. We have become a much more centralized organization over the last 3 or 4 years, and so many of those sorts of public relations, public affairs decisions are ultimately made here in Washington by our public affairs team and communications team. So I think the coordination has to probably start here, and I would suggest that you sort of approach your local chapters and then have them funnel it up through the national headquarters. As you and I both have commented on, it is a politically sensitive issue. And one of the things I think that's important to recognize, and this is not true of all national societies, but it's certainly true of the American Red Cross, we don't see ourselves as a fundamentally advocating organization. We fundamentally see ourselves as a humanitarian response organization. And so when we do take on issues that we're going to advocate for, there's an awful lot of careful consideration that goes into that conversation and that discussion, frankly, well above my pay grade. But at the same time, this is an issue I think that anybody who has a humanitarian bone in their body can recognize is something that is worthy of conversation and is worthy of consideration. So I guess your way to approach it would be to engage your local chapters, but certainly they would be expected to sort of raise that up the bar so that the headquarters can have a conversation about it.